Hello YouTube, I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney. On this channel, we answer publicly posted questions from YouTube users, getting folks the answers they need from an employment attorney. I apologize for when I cough during this video and the frog in my throat. I've got a cold, but I got to crank out a ton of videos because my travel schedule in December is wild, and I don't want to be like on a tiny little Cessna, like trying to make videos for you. So we're gonna preload some videos and get some folks' questions answered. We have a question here from YouTube user Small Brown Dog, who asks us, "Hi Vince, thanks for all the help and advice." You're welcome. Quickish question: can employers prevent their current employees from talking or texting or having friendships or relationships with former employees who are suing them if there is no non-solicitation, non-disparagement, or similar agreement in place? For example, what if you and your significant other work for the same employer and one of you was wrongfully terminated, was suing for discrimination or retaliation, while the other remained employed? Can the employer tell your wife or husband not to talk or contact you at home? Seems like an obvious no, right? What about coworker friends? What about coworker acquaintances? Do you have any legal recourse if your former employer is indeed engaging in this activity with their current employees or is threatening legal action against you if you initiate contact? I get that employers have a lot of control over what you can and can't do while on the clock, but it seems like it's a broad overreach to try to limit current and former employees' First Amendment rights and personal relationships during their own personal time. Any thoughts or advice? Any good stories? Thanks a ton. Okay. So you are broadly correct. One quick thing. First Amendment rights aren't in play unless you're working for the government, because First Amendment protects your right to freedom of speech from being limited by the government, not private employers. They're not the government. They're just private citizens like you. You can make an argument, oh, well, they have lots of money. True, but they're still not the government. So First Amendment rights not in play unless, again, you're working for the government. Now, if your spouse, we'll go with the hypothetical you provided, if your spouse is suing for workplace discrimination, workplace sexual harassment, whatever it is, and then the employer's like, yo, you can't talk to your spouse, you better not go home anymore, or we're going to fire you. I would argue that's retaliation. Because talking to your spouse could be characterized as supporting your spouse, and you're engaging in activities that are in furtherance then of a complaint of workplace discrimination or workplace sexual harassment, right? That lawsuit is a complaint, and, you supporting your spouse is in furtherance of that in some, indirect way. And so I would argue that is a retaliation claim if you're then fired for associating with your spouse. I would say that is illegal. So in your hypothetical, you're absolutely correct. Now, if you're suing, let's say your pal Eddie, is suing the employer for something that doesn't have retaliation protections. He's suing the employer because the employer didn't respect his minority shareholder rights. Just a hypothetical. Pick something that didn't have retaliation protections, right? Your employer comes to you and says, hey, your pal Eddie, he's suing us. We don't want to hear about you talking to him. We don't want to hear about you out with him. We don't want you calling him. We don't want you associating him. If we hear that you're associating with Eddie, we're going to let you go. Now, is their attorney thrilled they did that? Probably not. Their attorney's probably like, listen, that was a dumb move. Don't do that. But that's not what you're asking me. What you're asking me is that legal? In a world where retaliation protections are not in play, that could be legal. Believe it or not. Obviously, listen, state and local laws are going to apply, different answers in different jurisdictions, but in most of the states in the U.S., this hypothetical could play out. I go to work, boss is like, hey, Seymour's suing us. I know you used to eat lunch with Seymour. That's never going to happen again. You're never going to eat lunch with Seymour again. I'm like, well, actually, boss, I like Seymour more than you, so I'm going to go ahead and keep eating lunch with Seymour. Boss is like, that's cool. I guess it is a free country, but you're going to be done here if you do. Without retaliation protections in play, you might actually be at risk of termination, believe it or not. Because remember, in at-will employment, you can be terminated for any non-discriminatory reason or no reason at all. So any non-discriminatory reason could include, we don't like Seymour, and this guy hangs out with Seymour. That feels wild. That's a wild thing to say. But if you're an at-will employee, in most jurisdictions of the country, that's probably on the table. And again, unless there's retaliation protections of some kind in play or some other statute locally or on the state level, whatever it is, or some other complicating factor. Or remember, I'm saying if you're at will. So if you're in a union, that's probably hanging out with Seymour is probably not going to be a for-cause termination. If you're tenure, it probably doesn't rise to the level to strip you of tenure if you're hanging out with Seymour. If you're a civil servant, well, most of the civil service laws I'm familiar with would not let you be terminated for hanging out with Seymour in that hypothetical, right? So also if you have just a regular old contract that requires a for-cause reason to terminate you, or a collective bargaining agreement that requires a certain level to, terminate you, odds are the language in that contract would not allow you to be terminated just for associating with Seymour. Now, add one little note here. If Seymour happens to be an industrial spy of some kind, well, I can imagine that absolutely reaching the level of for cause if you're associating with Seymour, who's a known industrial spy, right? Like, that's obviously a complicating factor and something to throw in there. Excuse me. But I'm trying to give you the lay of the land, a quick conversation about this, because on your hypothetical, you're absolutely correct. I'm just trying to add a little extra, because you're not the only person. Like, this is your question, I'm answering your question, but people are also going to watch this, and some people might say, well, yeah, that's cool that you answered that question about that one hypothetical where the person is suing for workplace discrimination. But what if they're suing for a slip and fall or workers' comp, right? Workers' comp could very well have the same retaliation protections. If you're getting fired because your pal is suing for workers' compensation, it might be a good idea to talk to an attorney. It's not going to be the same. Not going to be the same as the discrimination scenario, but it's also very possible you're going to have protections in place. Now, if there's like a personal injury case, or like you work for a hospital and your buddy works for the hospital and is suing for medical malpractice for a procedure done at that same hospital, and they're like, oh, we're firing you because your buddy is suing us for medical malpractice. Maybe. That could very well be legal. Right? Believe it or not, insanely enough to say that could be legal. So, listen, I made 8 minutes out of what could have been like a simple yes. But I want to give you the most exact answer. If this video was helpful, like, subscribe, comment down below. It helps our channel. And if you want our channel to grow, share our videos. Thank you. Take care. I'll watch the comments down below if you have follow-up questions.